Atheism has failed. The West is suffering for its loss of faith, and unless we rediscover religion, our civilization is in peril. The thoughts of Britain's Chief Rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, who's been mixing it with the new atheists. Writing in the current edition of the Spectator, he calls for a new realisation that the loss of the religious heartbeat will ultimately lead to the demise of the body politic. Is he right? Michael Nugent is chair of Atheism Ireland. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain is minister of Maidenhead Synagogue and author of The Jews of England. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
Jonathan, let's be fair to the Chief Rabbi first of all and get a sense of the platform he's set out for us here. Could you summarise it for us?
Well, he was saying that, religion was supposedly in decline for the last sort of century. Atheists had a sort of free run at sort of governance and secular society, and look what a mess we're in. It hasn't worked. We're not passing on traditions and morals to the next generation, and therefore we've got to go back to the religious way. Now, that's more or less what he was saying. I'm not sure if I entirely agree with him, because I think he's got a good case that society certainly isn't at its best, we all know that, but he may have overstated it slightly in that atheism hasn't failed totally. Plenty of very good atheists. Religion isn't the only solution. It certainly has its failures, although I would argue very strongly it has its strengths as well. I suspect, to be honest, the problem isn't either religion or atheism, it's human nature. And I suppose one of the depressing things is the flaws of human nature, and that there's no obvious improvement in succeeding generations. And therefore the question of how to deal with our flaws and how to wrestle with improving society, it really faces every generation, whether it's religious or atheist.
Michael, the Chief Rabbi also makes the point that he can't, or history tells us, he says, that there has been no significant society which has had a moral compass where religion wasn't a significant role within that society. Is that historically true?
Well, it's not. I mean, there's a lot of research that shows that atheists and secularists are less nationalistic, less prejudiced, less anti-Semitic, less racist, less dogmatic, less ethnocentric, less close-minded, less authoritarian, that they're more politically tolerant, more supportive of gender equality, of abortion rights, of gay rights, that less supportive of the death penalty, less supportive of prison as retribution, less supportive of government torturing terrorist suspects. So there's a range of data, of properly researched social science data that shows that atheists and secularists not only have a moral compass, but have a more finely tuned moral compass than a lot of religious people.
Before people start texting on 81771, Michael, we have to raise the spectre of Stalin here, don't we?
Yes, and not just Stalin, but also Pol Pot or Mao Zedong or Hitler. In other words, yes, you're right, secularism can be tolerant, but it also can have these fatal flaws. And I think that's the problem.
Well, Hitler, of course, wasn't an atheist. Hitler went to war with God with us on the belt buckles of the Nazis, and he said that he was doing his work on behalf of the Creator. I do agree, obviously, that the problem is not religion per se. The problem is our faith and dogma. And by faith, I mean believing anything disproportionately to the evidence, and by dogma, I mean believing anything without questioning. And those problems of faith and dogma can be applied just as equally to secular projects as they can to religious projects. And that's why things like fascism and communism and the unregulated free market are just as much problems as religion. But the difficulty with religion, and what makes it different to those secular applications of faith and dogma, is that those other applications, you notice when they're not working because they bump into reality, whereas religion hides its testability in an imaginary afterlife, and that makes it harder to challenge and easier for it to maintain its hold over people.
Oh, I wouldn't agree with that, because for me, the great thing about religion is it deals with the here and now, and you can't really do much better than our slogans, if you like, love your neighbour as yourself. And if you take that seriously, and a lot of believers do, then you really do get down and help other people. That wonderful challenge you get in Genesis, am I my brother's keeper? And yes, the 10 Commandments don't cover every eventuality in life, but keeping those 10 and you're doing pretty well. In other words, I'm not saying religion's perfect, but it offers a structure, and that structure is both for the individual or a family or even society at large. And not only is it a top-down thing, but of course you've got local organisations in the form of churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever. And in other words, it does actually help society at its best. And yes, of course, there can be flaws, but at its best, religion is a power for good.
There is a problem, Michael, isn't there, for atheism? I've heard atheist agnostic leaders making this point themselves about issues to do with community building and developing atheism as a moral perspective which acts as a kind of binding ingredient within society. Many atheists haven't been doing such a great job in leading into that area, have they?
Well, many people haven't been doing a great job in that. You see, what religion has managed to do, it has managed to hijack the concepts of community and morality and ethics as being somehow religious concepts, and they're not. They're just human concepts. That is how people have behaved evolutionarily, because it's advantageous since humans have evolved.
If it's not one community, it'll be another community.
And the point is that atheism is, first of all, it's an assertion about the existence of gods, and so it's either true or it isn't true, irrespective of how people behave. And atheism is an important part of tackling the problems of faith and dogma. But what is the important part of tackling the problems of secular society is ethical liberal democracy, and that challenges both the religious and the secular aspects of faith and dogma.
It doesn't really make sense, Jonathan, does it? As Michael says, to say atheism has failed. It's a bit like saying vegetarianism has failed, isn't it? I mean, it's a metaphysical perspective. How could it have failed?
Yes, and I wouldn't have used those terms myself, but it certainly does have a problem in that atheism... yes, I can see its benefits on a negative level, in other words, not doing harm to people, but I'm not sure if it always has that sort of positive imperative that religion, again, at its best, not at its worst, that religion can have, to go out and look after the poor, to protect the vulnerable, to give to charity. And of course, many atheists and secularists do that on an individual level, but there's no organisational, local, communal imperative to do that. And so religion has an advantage in that sense.
Well, isn't that because many atheists will join already existing organisations or give them money to Médecins Sans Frontières or Oxfam or something like this? They don't have a brand over it saying Atheism Aid.
True, but with respect, all of those, I mean, Oxfam, RSPCA, most of them were founded by religious individuals.
Well, so were the schools and hospitals. That's because of the history of religion across the world.
Yes, exactly. I'm not saying we've got a monopoly on them, but where has atheism taken over? What are the new institutions that it's developed to succeed?
Michael?
Well, I mean, Doctors Without Frontiers is one. The Red Cross is another. Atheist Ireland has our own project.
The Red what?
The Red Cross organisation.
Exactly, Red Cross.
Yes, which is a secular organisation. The Red Cross is the symbol of Switzerland. It's nothing to do with religion. And Atheist Ireland has our own project called Good Without Gods, where we do things like raising money for third world business initiatives through microfinancing lending and things like that. There's any number of organisations. Richard Dawkins runs a foundation that raises money for disaster relief around the world. The idea that atheists are somehow lack a moral compass is the most arrogant and just frankly silly assertion to make. Human beings have a natural tendency towards empathy and compassion and reciprocity, and we also have a tendency towards selfishness. And regardless of what we believe about the source of our human nature, whether we believe it's natural or supernatural, those elements exist within all humans.
Michael, thank you very much. Michael Nugent, Chair of Atheism Ireland. Our thanks to Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Romain as well.